The free agency tour is on, and the wallets have opened up to try and lure in Juan Soto. 26-year-old outfitter essentially has everyone clamoring for the chance to land him. That contract likely will be huge, courtesy of the services of Scott Boras. And as that courtship from teams around the league continues, Soto's doing his own free agency tour around the land, and this is what things should look like for him this week, who Soto is expected to meet with. The Yankees, of course, keeping it with New York with the Mets, the Blue Jays, and Red Sox, all with plans to meet with Juan Soto to try and bring him in to sign him out of free agency. When you talk signings, when you talk building a team, we bring in our GM, Jim Bowden. And Jim, as we get ready for these Juan Soto meetings to happen with those four teams, I want to get like the inside sense from you of like behind the scenes, what goes on before these meetings of a prize free agent? Are you doing mock meetings, deciding where you want to go eat, deciding, okay, someone play the role of Scott Boras? Like, what all do you do before bringing the guy in?
Yeah, there's a lot of things behind this, and it really depends on what organization. So let's start with the Toronto Blue Jays as an example. They finished second in the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, and they offered the second most money for him. So if you're Scott Boras, you want the Blue Jays to go first because you're hoping that they're going to repeat history and do the same type of offer they gave Ohtani to your client, Juan Soto, and you want to be able to have that in the bag by the time you get to meet with the New York teams, right? Now, if you're Toronto, you're going to sell Soto the same way you tried to sell Shohei Ohtani. In other words, you're going to sell him on the facility in spring training, your facility in Toronto. You're going to sell him not just on the city of Toronto, but the country of Canada. You're going to show how he can become the biggest celebrity in the entire country, not a city. Obviously, you need to sell your city, right? And if the first meeting's in Newport Beach with Soto and not in Toronto, then you're going to bring a video with you with all the details of the neighborhoods, the city, the restaurants, the lifestyle, all of those things. Now, the most important thing to Juan Soto, according to his representatives at Boras Corporation, they told me that they want each team to sell how they're going to win long term because Soto wants to win world championships, plural. So the Blue Jays are going to have to go in and sell their major league team. They're going to have to sell their farm system. They're going to have to sell their drafting. Now, they've got a problem because they don't have a very good organization right now. And their two best players are unsigned after this year. So the challenge is going to be there. And I don't see any pathway that Soto ends up in Toronto. But they need them to lead it off because they have a chance to put the first $600 million on the table.
So then when we talk about the other schools, excuse me, the other teams out there, when you plan things out, do you think about, okay, if he's going to Toronto first, if I'm the Mets, I'm going to cater the way that I'm going to do my meeting based off what you think Toronto might do? Or do you stay full focused with what you plan?
Yeah, you got to be full focused on how you're going to get him there. Now, if you're Steve Cohen, the one thing you know you can do is you can write the biggest check and you can make the biggest offer. You're going to have to sell the system because Juan Soto knows the Yankee system. He doesn't know the Mets system. So they're going to go through the farm system. They're going to go through the major league team. And then Steve Cohen's going to lay out the plan that his president of baseball operations, David Stearns, has on how they're going to win. And one of the ways they're going to win is they're really focused on improving the starting pitching. They're all in on Corbin Burns right now. They're in on Max Fried right now. They've had conversations with Blake Snell. They are involved in Roki Sasaki. So the Mets are all there. So they're going to be able to lay out a really good plan in front of Juan Soto, showing them how they're going to win. As Steve Cohen at some point will bring him to his home. That's what he did with Francisco Lindor when he got the Lindor deal done. But the initial meetings basically give the teams that introduction, selling your organization, where you're going, where you are now. He doesn't have to sell New York City. Juan Soto loves New York City, of course. But every organization is doing it differently. Now, Boston is meeting, yes, technically on Soto, but they're in on Boras's pitchers, not Soto. But, you know, they're going to have discussions. Why? Because if he were to sign with the Yankees, the Red Sox want to make sure they spend as much of their budget as they possibly can, short and long term, so they have less money to spend on other players. So Boston will stay involved. Like Toronto, I don't think they really have a legitimate chance to get Juan Soto, nor do I think they'll make an offer even close to what the New York teams have. But Boston also wants Scott Boras as pitcher. So they better say the right things when they meet with Boras and say things publicly, because Boras needs teams like Toronto and Boston to help raise the price for the New York teams.
All about playing the game correctly. Timeline, what's it looking like this? You think we'll get a decision after the new year, or maybe something we'll hear before the winter meetings?
Look, I think there's a chance this particular year, because of the number of clients Scott Boras has, I think there's a really legitimate chance that Juan Soto picks his new team by the winter meetings or at the winter meetings. Because a lot of the other Boras clients are going to be interrelated to Soto. And I'll go right to Pete Alonso, the first baseman of the Mets. The Mets aren't going to sign Soto and Alonso. So if Soto were to sign with the Mets, that takes Alonso, one of the landing places for Alonso, off the board, right? They'll probably sign a third baseman, move Vientos to first base. If Soto signs with the Yankees, then that would obviously leave the Mets still in on Alonso. So I think timing-wise, I think Boras would hold up the entire market if he delayed this thing till January. And I don't think that's going to be the case, because Boras is making him the priority. That's why they have the 4 meetings scheduled this week: Toronto, Boston, the Mets, and the Yankees, in that order. I'm also told that the Dodgers may be meeting with him this week too, although they have not confirmed that publicly. There are people that have even denied they're going to be in the hunt. But you know Andrew Friedman and Mark Walter. I know how much Dave Roberts loves Juan Soto. So I think the Dodgers are a 15 there, and I think the Phillies are in the discussion as well. I don't think they're completely out. But if I had to guess right now, I think both New York teams have the best shot to get him.
Okay, Jim, so between those two New York teams, I'll put you on the spot. Where does he end up?
It really depends if Hal Steinbrenner will match whatever Steve Cohen puts on the table. I believe very strongly that Steve Cohen, when it's all said and done, the owner of the Mets, will make the largest offer to Juan Soto, and then Soto will decide where he wants to go. That's what Steve Cohen did with Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who then went back to the Dodgers and said, match the Mets offer and you got me, and they did. I think that Hal Steinbrenner will have that opportunity. If I had to lean one way, I'm going to go slight edge Yankees, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the Mets just blow the Yankees out and the Yankees then pivot and go get 3 guys to replace Soto.
Yeah, so you speak of pivoting. One other name out there that's certainly worth some attention is the Japanese pitcher Roki Sasaki, who has been posted by his Japanese team. I know that process works a little bit different, so can you kind of explain how this is not just a normal free agency in terms of trying to get Sasaki?
Yeah, he's under 25 years old, an international player, so it's not a bidding war for him. You can only spend what's in your international pool. Now, if he decides to sign before December 15th, the Dodgers have the most money in their pool left at $2.5 million. The Padres have $2.2 million. The Orioles have $2.1. But example, a team like the Mets only have $314,000. Now, he is not going to sign until after January 15th. Okay, because that's when the pools get larger, and now you're working on the next year's pool, and that number ends up being somewhere in the $5 to $9 million range, depending upon the team. Now, keep in mind, Sasaki is a top prospect, but you need to view him more like Andrew Painter of the Phillies than you do a pitcher like Yamamoto or Tanaka or Darvish when they came over, because he's not as accomplished. He's more of a prospect. Now, he throws 97 to 103 miles an hour. He has a 75 split finger on a scouting scale of 20 to 80, and he's got a 60 slider. All of his stuff screams at me stars. In fact, if I had to give you a comp for him, I would say he's somewhere between Justin Verlander, Jacob deGrom, and Zach Wheeler. He is that good in terms of potential, but not accomplishments. Now, I will say this. There has been a lot of media talk about him eventually signing with the Dodgers. If you talk to people in the industry, everyone believes he's going to the Dodgers. But let me tell you what I've heard. I've heard that, number one, he'll be better off from an endorsement perspective, which is going to be important here, because he's not going to be able to make any free agent money until 2030, because the team that gets him will control him for 6 years. So if he comes to the Dodgers, he'll be in the shadow of Ohtani and Yamamoto. Now, keep this in mind. Yamamoto makes less money than Kodai Senga, because Yamamoto is under the shadow of Ohtani. If Sasaki goes to the Dodgers, he's not going to get that endorsement money. Ohtani gets it all. That's just how it works. So it's more likely Sasaki signs with the Padres, maybe even the Rays or the Mets, than it is the Dodgers at this point. And keep in mind, Yu Darvish is like a godfather to Sasaki. And he's 38 years old. Darvish could pass the torch right down to Sasaki with San Diego. But one thing I will promise you, he will not sign until at least January 15th. That's a promise and a guarantee.
Verlander, DeGrom, Wheeler as comps. If we're viewing him more as a prospect, do you think whoever he signs for him, will he make a major league debut and make that roster day one, or will he spend some time in the minors?
Yeah, I do think he'll make the roster. I think he'll be limited in innings in the 120 to 130 range tops. You know, this is a guy that's had to battle some injuries, he's had oblique injuries. He's been taken care of in Japan. They've done a good job of doing that. I got to tell you, I called the games during the World Baseball Classic, and I called the game that Yamamoto and Sasaki both pitched. And I looked at Yamamoto as a number 2 starter that had 6 pitches, that added, subtracted, knew how to pitch. But Sasaki screamed Verlander, DeGrom, Wheeler at me. The stuff and the potential's off the charts. But you got to view him. When I saw him in the World Baseball Classic, I kind of viewed him as that junior in college, that first-round pick, that he would have been the first-round pick in that draft. Like, he's that Garrett Cole prospect when he was coming out of UCLA, right? And that's how we should view him. And right now, it's kind of like Andrew Painter of the Phillies. I look at Painter as a guy that could be an ace and a Cy Young Award winner. That's what I think Sasaki can develop into. But remember, he's only 22 years old. He's just learning how to pitch. Give him time. But again, be careful. Don't jump into what everyone's saying that he's necessarily a Dodger, because my intel says opposite.
Yeah, and a lot of time to hopefully let him grow with whatever team signs him, since you mentioned that 6-year deal that they'll have to be able to work with Sasaki. Jim Bowden, thank you so much as we look forward to the free agency and all the money that will be handed out. And when you talk money, oh, at the top is always still Shohei Ohtani. That 10-year, $700 million deal. And Scott Boras and company is certainly hoping that they can get Soto to be maybe number 2 here on this list, above Mike Trout, hoping for that $600 million range when it comes to the largest contracts in MLB history.